The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 847 alien representatives sat in their floating chairs waiting. Their eyes were fixed on the small human section where only 3 figures remained. Dae-ho Kim stood at the speaking platform. His hands were steady, but his heart was heavy. Behind him sat Soo-jin Park, the admiral who commanded the last human fleet in council space. Next to her was Taiwan Lee, still young and still hoping this could be stopped. The vote had already happened. 847 votes to expel humanity from the Galactic Council. 1 vote against. The humans had voted against their own removal, but it did not matter. "You have made your choice," Dae-ho said into the microphone. His voice echoed through the massive hall. "We accept it." Chancellor Vex Altair, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes, leaned forward. "The Terra incident cannot be ignored, Ambassador Kim. Your species interfered with natural planetary death. You violated our most sacred law." Dae-ho closed his eyes for a moment. The Terra incident. 3 months ago, human scientists had tried to save a dying planet. The world was going to lose all life in 50 years. Humans had worked day and night to find a solution. They had created a new type of atmospheric processor that could have saved billions of lives, but the council called it interference. They said planets should die naturally if that was their fate. They said humans were too emotional, too quick to act without thinking. "We saved 12 billion lives," Dae-ho replied. 12 billion beings who can now watch their children grow up. "We did what we thought was right." "You did what you felt was right," corrected Nixari Prime, the leader of the logical Nixari collective. Its mechanical voice was cold and precise. "Feelings are not acceptable reasons for major decisions. Logic must guide all actions in civilized space." Soo-jin Park stood up. She was a strong woman who had fought in 3 wars for the council. "Logic?" she asked. "Was it logical to let 12 billion people die when we could save them?" "It was the natural order," Chancellor Vex Altair said. "Humans do not understand this. You see suffering and immediately want to fix it. You do not consider the bigger picture." Taiwan Lee jumped to his feet. He was only 28 years old and had spent his whole life believing in the council. "What bigger picture? What is bigger than saving lives?" The Chancellor's silver eyes glowed brighter. "Balance, young human. The universe has balance. Some worlds live, some worlds die. Some species survive, some do not. When you interfere with natural death, you upset this balance. Balance," Dae-ho repeated slowly. "Is that what you call watching children starve when you have food? Is that what you call ignoring disease when you have medicine?" "We call it wisdom," Nixari Prime said. "Something humans have not yet learned." The hall was completely quiet now. Even the usual whispers and small sounds had stopped. Everyone was watching the 3 humans and waiting to see what would happen next. Dae-ho looked around the Great Hall. He had stood here many times before. He had given speeches about cooperation and friendship between species. He had helped solve problems and stop wars. Now it was ending. "We will leave," he said finally. "All human ships will exit council space within 7 days. We will close our embassies and recall our people. We will respect your decision." Chancellor Vex Altair nodded. "Good. It is for the best." "But," Dae-ho continued, "you should know something. You are making a mistake." The Chancellor's eyes flashed with anger. "We do not make mistakes, human. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years?" "Yes," Dae-ho said quietly. "And in all that time, how many problems did you solve by sitting in meetings and debating? How many diseases did you cure by forming committees? How many wars did you stop by writing reports?" The hall was still silent, but now it felt different, uncomfortable. "We brought something different to the council," Dae-ho went on. "We brought the idea that sometimes you have to act fast. Sometimes you have to try something new even if it might not work. Sometimes you have to help people even when the rules say you should not." Soo-jin Park stepped forward. "Our engineers fixed problems. Your best minds said were impossible to fix. Our doctors found cures for diseases your researchers had given up on. Our diplomats stopped wars by actually talking to people instead of reading reports about them. We brought chaos, Nexari Prime said coldly. We brought solutions, Taewon Lee shot back. Real solutions to real problems. Daeho raised his hand, and the young man fell silent. We did bring something different, he admitted. We brought hope. We brought the belief that things can always get better if you are willing to work for it. We brought the idea that every life matters, not just the ones that fit into your balance. He paused and looked directly at Chancellor Vex Altair. And now you are throwing that away. The Chancellor stood up. His voice was final. The decision is made. Humans are expelled from the Council. All communication channels will be closed. All trade agreements are cancelled. You have 7 days. Daeho nodded slowly. He gathered his papers and put them in his case. Sujin Park and Taewon Lee stood beside him. You will remember this silence, Daeho said as they walked toward the exit, and when you do, it will be too late. The 3 humans left the Great Hall. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness behind them. Outside, Sujin looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were already preparing to leave. Colonies were packing up. Scientists were destroying their research rather than leave it behind. What do we do now? Taewon asked. He sounded lost. We go home, Sujin said. We take care of our own people. And we wait. Wait for what? Daeho looked back at the council building one last time. For them to realize what they have lost. 3 days later, the last human ship powered down its transponder and disappeared into dark space. The galaxy fell silent. No more human voices on the communication channels. No more human ships at the trade stations. No more human researchers. In the laboratories, the council members returned to their normal business. They held meetings and wrote reports. They debated and formed committees. They followed all the proper procedures, and slowly, very slowly, they began to forget what it was like to have humans around. They forgot the sound of human laughter in the halls. They forgot the way humans would work through the night to solve a problem. They forgot how humans would cry when someone died, even if that someone was from a different species. The silence had begun, and with it, the first step toward catastrophe. 2 years had passed since the humans left. The Galactic Council worked the same way it always had. Meetings happened on schedule, reports were filed properly, laws were debated and voted on according to tradition. But something was wrong. Dr. Silani was the first to notice. She was the Council's chief medical officer, a brilliant Altarian with 50 years of experience. She stood in her laboratory looking at test results that made no sense. The Zephyrian plague had appeared 6 months ago on the Outer Rim colonies. At first, it seemed like any other disease. The symptoms were clear: fever, purple spots on the skin, and difficulty breathing. Dr. Zalani and her team had immediately started working on a cure. They had tried everything. Standard antibiotics did not work. Experimental treatments failed. Advanced genetic therapy showed no results. The disease kept spreading from planet to planet, and people kept dying. Doctor, her assistant said, walking into the laboratory, the death count from New Zephyr is now at 40,000. Dr. Zalani put down her tablet and rubbed her temples. What about the new treatment protocol? Failed, just like the others. Dr. Zalani stared at the wall where she kept pictures of all the diseases her team had defeated over the years. Dozens of pictures, dozens of victories, but not this time. Doctor, her assistant said quietly, do you remember Dr. Bo-Ram Choi? The name hit Dr. Zalani like a punch to the stomach. Bo-Ram Choi. The human doctor who had worked with the medical division for 12 years. The human who had cured the Andorian flu when everyone said it was impossible. The human who had found treatments for diseases that had puzzled alien doctors. For decades. Bo-Ram was working on something similar before the humans left. Her assistant continued. She had a theory about adaptive biological treatment, something about letting the cure evolve with the disease. Dr. Zalani had called Bo-Ram's theories primitive back then. Human medicine was too emotional, too willing to take risks, too unscientific. But now, where are her research files? Dr. Zalani asked. Destroyed. All human research was deleted when they were expelled. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, engineer Kex Moeller was having his own problems. He stood on the observation deck of Stellar Bridge 7, watching his crews work frantically on the support struts. The stellar bridges were the Council's greatest achievement, massive structures that bent space itself, allowing instant travel between distant star systems. There were 12 bridges in total, connecting all the major worlds of the galaxy. And they were failing. It had started small. Bridge 9 had experienced minor power fluctuations. Bridge 3 had reported unusual stress readings in its core structure. Now, Bridge 7 was showing signs of complete system failure. "Sir," his chief technician called over the communicator, "the resonance frequencies are all wrong. The bridge is vibrating at dangerous levels." Kex Moeller checked his instruments. The numbers were terrible. If Bridge 7 collapsed, it would cut off 15 star systems from the rest of the galaxy. Billions of beings would be trapped. "Have you tried the standard recalibration procedure?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Multiple times. Nothing works." Kex Moeller knew why. The stellar bridges had always been temperamental. They required constant adjustments and fine-tuning. The original design team had included both Nexari logicians and human engineers. The Nexari had provided the mathematical frameworks. The humans had provided something else. Intuition, Yun-Woo Song, had been the human chief engineer for the bridge project. He had a gift for understanding how the bridges felt. He could look at a set of readings and know exactly what adjustments were needed. Other engineers called it impossible. They said engineering was about precise calculations, not feelings. But Hyun-Woo's methods had worked. For 15 years, the bridges had run perfectly under his supervision. Now he was gone, and the bridges were dying. "Sir?" the technician called again. "I found something in the old files. A note from Engineer Song. He wrote that the bridges need to be treated like living things, not machines. He said they have to be coaxed, not forced." Kex Moeller stared at the note on his screen. Living things? Coaxed? It sounded like human nonsense. But the bridges were still failing, and he was running out of ideas. The third problem was happening in the Council's integration department. Director Thale Voss was responsible for helping newly discovered species join galactic civilization. It was delicate work that required patience and understanding, and it was going very badly. The latest species to be contacted were the Corvin. They were peaceful plant-like beings from a water world. According to all the protocols, integration should have been simple. The Corvin were intelligent and eager to learn about galactic civilization, but every attempt at communication had failed. The Corvin representatives would arrive at meetings excited and hopeful. After a few hours with Council diplomats, they would leave confused and upset. 3 different Corvin groups had already asked to end all contact with the Council. Director Thale Voss could not understand what was going wrong. His team followed every rule in the integration manual. They provided information about Council laws and procedures. They explained the importance of logic and order in galactic affairs. They offered standard trade agreements and diplomatic relationships. Everything was done correctly, but it was not working. "Director," his aide said, entering his office. "The Corvin delegation has decided to leave early. They say they feel unwelcome." Director Thale Voss sank into his chair. This was the 4th failed integration in 2 years. Before the humans left, the integration department had a perfect success rate. He opened his files and found the old integration reports. The successful ones all had the same signature at the bottom: Gina Yoon, Human Cultural Liaison. Gina had been strange even for a human. She would spend hours just talking with new species about their homes, their families, their dreams. She would ask questions that seemed pointless. What did their children like to play? What foods made them happy? What stories did they tell about the stars? The other council members had thought Gina's methods were a waste of time. Integration was about law and procedure, not personal stories. But somehow, every species that worked with Gina became enthusiastic council members. Now Director Thale Voss understood why. Gina had not been processing new species. She had been making them feel welcome. The problems were getting worse. Each week brought new reports of failure. The plague was spreading faster. Another bridge showed signs of instability. More new. Species were rejecting council contact. But the council members did not connect these problems to the absence of humans. They were proud beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had expelled the humans for good reasons. The current difficulties were just temporary setbacks. Chancellor Vex Altair called a meeting to address the growing concerns. The medical crisis on the Outer Rim is unfortunate, he told the assembled representatives. But our scientists will find a solution through proper research methods. The bridge failures are concerning, he continued, but our engineers will solve these problems using logical analysis and proven techniques. The integration difficulties are temporary. New species simply need time to understand the benefits of council membership. Nexari Prime agreed. These problems have natural solutions. We do not need primitive human methods of guessing and emotional response. Logic will prevail. But in the back of the hall, some of the older council members were not so sure. They remembered how quickly humans could solve problems. They remembered the energy and hope that humans had brought to difficult situations. Dr. Zelani left the meeting feeling more worried than before. That night she sat in her laboratory and thought about Boram Choi. The human doctor had always said that medicine was about more than just killing disease. It was about understanding life. Engineer Kex Moeller stood on Bridge 7 and felt the structure shaking under his feet. He thought about Hyun Woo-song and the human belief that even machines could have feelings. Director Thalavos looked at his reports of failed integrations and remembered Gina Yoon's patient smile as she helped. Nervous alien visitors feel at home. The cracks were showing. Problems that had never existed when humans were part of the council were now growing bigger every day. But the council leadership refused to see the connection. In the vast silence of space, human ships continued their quiet exile. They watched the galaxy from a distance and saw the troubles beginning. Some humans wanted to help. Others said the council had made their choice and should live with it. But all of them knew that things were about to get much worse. 3 years after the humans left, everything fell apart at once. The first disaster was the war. The Corvani Mining Consortium and the Stellax Republic had been arguing about asteroid mining rights for months. It was a simple dispute that should have been easy to solve. Both sides wanted the same mineral-rich asteroid belt, but there were plenty of resources for everyone. Ambassador Velkane of the Corvani sat across from General Thex Stellax in the Council Mediation Chamber. Between them sat Mediator Prime Nexus 7, a logical being whose job was to find fair solutions to conflicts. The mining rights clearly belong to the Corvani Consortium, Velkane said, his voice getting louder. We filed the claim first. Filing first means nothing, General Thex Stellax replied coldly. The Stellax Republic has superior mining technology. We can extract more resources efficiently. Mediator Prime Nexus 7 reviewed the legal documents on his screen. According to Council Law 447A, mining rights are awarded based on 3 factors: claim priority, technological capability, and resource utilization efficiency. For 6 hours they argued about laws and regulations. Nexus 7 quoted legal precedents and mathematical formulas. Both sides presented evidence and logical arguments. Everything was done according to proper procedure. But nothing was solved. This is pointless, Velkane finally said, standing up. You robots do not understand anything except your precious rules. Emotional outbursts are not productive, Nexus 7 replied calmly. Please return to logical discussion. General Thex Stellax also stood up. The Corvani are right about one thing. This is pointless. The Stellax Republic will take what we need. Both ambassadors left the mediation chamber angry and frustrated. Within a week, the first shots were fired. Corvani mining ships attacked a Stellax survey vessel. The Stellax military responded by destroying a Corvani station. The war had begun. In the old days, Sungmin Ko would have handled this differently. The human mediator had an unusual approach to conflict resolution. Instead of starting with laws and regulations, he would begin by asking simple questions. What do you really need? What are you afraid of? What would make your people happy? Other council members had laughed at Seung-min's methods. They called his approach primitive emotion-based diplomacy. But somehow Seung-min had solved conflicts that had puzzled logical mediators for years. He understood something that the council had forgotten. Most fights were not really about the things people said they were fighting about. The Corvani and Stellax were not really fighting about mining rights. The Corvani were afraid that their small young civilization would be pushed aside by larger powers. The Stellax were worried that their military reputation was weakening and needed a victory to maintain respect. Seung-min would have talked to both sides about their fears. He would have found a solution that gave the Corvani security and the Stellax honor. He would have done it by listening to their hearts, not just their legal arguments. But Seung-min was gone, and now the galaxy was at war. The second disaster was happening on dozens of worlds at once. The Great Famine had started slowly, but now, it was affecting entire star systems. Agricultural specialist Vex Hortus stood in the failing crop fields of New Ceres, watching plants die. The soil was rich, the climate was perfect, but nothing would grow properly anymore. "What is the problem?" asked Governor Mel Ceres, looking at the brown, withered plants. "Unknown," Vex Hortus admitted. "We have tried all standard agricultural techniques. Soil analysis shows optimal growing conditions. Weather patterns are normal. But crop yields have dropped by 60% across 17 worlds." The governor looked worried. "Can we import food from other systems?" "Many other systems have the same problem. Food imports have become extremely expensive." Vex Hortus knew what the real problem was, but he was afraid to say it out loud. The failing crops were not because of soil or weather. They were failing because the council no longer understood how to adapt agriculture to different worlds. Young He-shin had been the human agricultural specialist who worked with alien farming communities across the galaxy. She had developed something called adaptive agriculture, farming methods that changed based on local conditions and alien plant biology. Young He's approach had seemed chaotic to other agricultural experts. Instead of using standard procedures, she would spend months living with local farmers. She would learn about traditional growing methods. She would experiment with mixing different species of plants. She would try unusual combinations that made no logical sense. But her methods had worked. Under Young He's guidance, dozens of worlds had achieved record crop yields. She had created farming systems that were flexible and adaptable, able to handle changes in climate or soil conditions. Now she was gone, and the rigid, standardized farming methods used by the council were failing. The galaxy was slowly running out of food. The third disaster was breaking hearts across the galaxy. Dr. Min Seo Jung had been a child psychologist who specialized in helping young beings from newly contacted species adapt to galactic civilization. Her work had seemed unnecessary to most council members. Children were just small versions of adults, they thought. They would learn proper behavior through education and discipline. But Dr. Min Seo had understood something important. Children from different species had different emotional needs. What made a human child feel safe might terrify a Zephyrian child. What comforted a Nexari youth might confuse a Corvani youngling. She had created individual integration programs for children from each species. She had trained teachers to understand different types of intelligence and emotional development. She had built playgrounds and schools that felt welcoming to beings from many different worlds. Now the integration programs were failing catastrophically. Children from new species were developing severe emotional problems. Some became violent and angry. Others withdrew completely and refused to speak. Many begged to return home, crying that they felt lost and alone. The council's solution was more discipline and stricter education. They created standardized programs that treated all children the same way. When the programs failed, they blamed the children for being too emotional or too primitive. On the world of Corva Prime, young Zeke Corva sat in his assigned classroom, staring out the window at the gray council buildings. He was 7 years old and had been on the capital world for 6 months. Every day, teachers told him about council laws and proper behavior. Every day he learned about logic and order and the importance of following rules. But no one asked him about his home. No one wanted to hear about the singing trees of Corva or the festivals where his people danced under 3 moons. No one cared that he missed his family or that the food here tasted strange or that he was scared of the huge alien buildings. At night, Zeke Corva would cry quietly in his dormitory bed. He was not the only one. Children from 12 different species were all trying to be brave while feeling completely alone. Dr. Minseo would have sat with each child and listened to their stories. She would have helped them make friends with children from other worlds. She would have created activities that let them share their cultures while learning about galactic civilization. But Dr. Minseo was gone, and the children were suffering. The 3 disasters were connected, but the council could not see how. They treated each problem separately, forming different committees and writing different reports. The war between the Corvani and Stellax was getting worse. Millions of beings had died. Entire star systems were being destroyed. Trade routes were disrupted, making the food crisis even more severe. Chancellor Vex Altair called emergency sessions, but every solution required more laws and more regulations. No one seemed able to think of new approaches or creative solutions. The Zephyrian plague, meanwhile, had spread to 47 worlds. Dr. Zelani and her team were no closer to finding a cure. The death toll was now in the millions, and across the galaxy, integration programs continued to fail. New species were rejecting council membership. Some were becoming hostile, saying the council was cold and uncaring. In their hidden ships, humans watched the disasters unfold. Some wanted to help immediately. Others argued that the council needed to learn from their mistakes. Captain Sujin Park stood on the bridge of the human vessel Silent Hope, looking at reports from across the galaxy. Her crew was ready to help with medical aid or engineering support, but they had been ordered to maintain silence. "Captain," her communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving emergency broadcasts from 17 different worlds. They are asking for any help available." Sujin's heart ached. These were not council worlds calling for help. These were civilian populations, families and children who were suffering while their leaders argued about procedure. "Can we reach them without being detected by council forces?" she asked. "Yes, Captain. We could provide medical supplies and food to the Outer Rim colonies. The council is too busy with the war to patrol those areas carefully." Sujin made her decision. "Do it, but keep it quiet. We help who we can, but we do not reveal ourselves." The human ships began moving through the dark, carrying supplies to desperate worlds. They saved lives quietly, without taking credit or asking for thanks. But the larger disasters continued to grow. The galaxy was breaking apart, and the Council still could not understand why. The Galactic Council was dying, and finally, someone was willing to admit it. Dr. Zelani sat in the emergency session, watching council members argue about the latest disasters. The Corvani-Stellax War had spread to include 6 more systems. The plague now affected 73 worlds. Food shortages had caused riots on 15 planets. "We need new approaches," she said, interrupting the debate. "Everything we have tried has failed." Chancellor Vex Altair turned his silver eyes toward her. "Dr. Zelani, we appreciate your dedication, but proper procedure takes time. We cannot abandon our methods simply because we face temporary difficulties." "Temporary?" Dr. Zelani stood up, her voice getting louder. 50 million beings have died from the plague. Entire star systems are being destroyed in this war. Children are starving on dozens of worlds. How is this temporary? The hall fell silent. Council members rarely raised their voices or showed emotion. "Doctor, please control yourself," Nexari Prime said coldly. "Emotional responses cloud logical thinking." "Maybe logical thinking is not enough," Dr. Zelani replied. "Maybe we need something else." She paused, knowing her next words would shock everyone in the hall. "Maybe we need the humans back." The reaction was immediate. Council members began talking angrily. Some called her suggestion impossible. Others said she was being influenced by stress and should take a leave of absence. But Engineer Kex Moeller stood up from his section. "Dr. Zelani is right," he said loudly. I have been working on the bridge failures for 8 months. Nothing works. But I found old repair logs from engineer Hyun-Woo Song. His methods were completely different from ours, and they actually worked. Director Thale Voss also stood. The integration failures started when we lost our human cultural liaisons. Every successful first contact we made in the past 20 years involved human mediators. More voices joined in. Medical researchers who remembered Dr. Bo Ram Choi's breakthrough treatments, agricultural specialists who had worked with Young Hee, Shin, diplomats who had seen Seung-Min Ko stop wars with simple conversations. Chancellor Vex Altair raised his hand for silence. Even if your assessment is correct, he said stiffly, the humans were expelled for good reasons. They violated our most fundamental laws. They saved 12 billion lives, Dr. Zalani shot back. That is what they did wrong. They saved lives. When we said they should let them die. The argument continued for hours, but eventually a decision was made. A secret committee would be formed to locate the humans and assess whether contact should be re-established. The committee would be small and would work without official council approval. Dr. Zalani was chosen to lead the search team, along with engineer Kex Moeller and director Thale Voss. They were given a small, fast ship and orders to tell no one about. Their mission, finding the humans, proved to be harder than expected. When the humans left council space, they had turned off all tracking devices. Their ships had disappeared into the vast emptiness between the stars. The search team started by visiting the last known human positions. They found nothing except empty space and fading energy signatures from old human camps. They could be anywhere. Director Thale Voss said, looking at the star charts. The galaxy is enormous and they have had 3 years to hide. We need to think like humans, Dr. Zalani replied. Where would they go? What would they do? Engineer Kex Moeller had an idea. Humans always wanted to help people, even when they were not supposed to. Maybe they are still helping. They began investigating unexplained events across the galaxy. Medical supplies that appeared mysteriously on plague-affected worlds. Engineering problems that were solved overnight by unknown technicians. Food shipments that arrived at starving colonies with no record of who sent them. The pattern was clear. Someone was providing secret aid to worlds in crisis. Someone who had advanced medical knowledge, engineering skills, and agricultural expertise. Someone who cared more about saving lives than following rules. The search team followed the trail of mysterious aid to the Outer Rim territories. In the dark space between star systems, their sensors finally detected something. A small energy signature that matched human technology. There, Dr. Zalani said, pointing at the scanner display. That is a human ship. They approached carefully, broadcasting peaceful intentions. The human ship appeared on their view screen, a sleek vessel painted dark gray to blend with the void of space. A voice came over the communication system, speaking in accented galactic standard. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Jun Ki Nam of the Free Human Fleet. State your intentions. Dr. Zalani took a deep breath. Commander Nam, this is Dr. Zalani of the Galactic Council Medical Division. We need to talk. There was a long pause. Then, Doctor, with respect, the Council made it very clear that they want nothing to do with humans. Why are you here? Because we were wrong, Dr. Zalani said simply, and now the galaxy is dying. Another pause. Stand by, Doctor. I need to make some calls. 2 hours later, Dr. Zalani and her team were sitting in the meeting room of a hidden, human station. The station was larger than they had expected, with hundreds of people working in laboratories, workshops, and command centers. Commander Jun Ki Nam was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair. He listened patiently as Dr. Zalani explained the disasters affecting the galaxy. We have been watching, he said when she finished. We know about the plague, the war, the famine. Some of our people have been trying to help where they can. Some of your people? Engineer Kex Moeller asked. Junki smiled sadly. Doctor, did you think we would just disappear? There are millions of humans scattered across dozens of hidden colonies. Some wanted to forget about the galaxy entirely. Others could not stop caring about people who were suffering. He led them to an observation deck where they could see the station's main operations center. Humans were working at computers, monitoring communication channels from across the galaxy. Medical teams were preparing supply shipments. Engineers were designing solutions to infrastructure problems. "This is amazing," Director Thalavos said. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since the day we left Council space," Junki replied. "We knew that cutting off all human aid would cause problems. We decided to help secretly, even though it put us at risk." Dr. Zelani felt a mix of amazement and shame. "You have been saving lives while we have been debating procedures." "It is what humans do," said a new voice. They turned to see a woman, approaching, Yunji Ryu, who had been introduced as the station's civilian leader. "We could not just watch people suffer," Yunji continued. "Even after the council rejected us, we still felt responsible for helping where we could." She led them to the medical section, where human doctors were working on plague samples. Dr. Boram Choi has been working on the Zephyrian plague since it first appeared. She has developed 3 potential treatments, but we cannot test them properly from hiding. In the engineering section, they met human technicians who had been studying the bridge failures. "The resonance frequencies are all wrong," one engineer explained. "The bridges need constant micro-adjustments based on local gravitational conditions. It requires intuitive understanding, not just calculations." The agriculture department had been developing new crop varieties that could survive in changing climatic conditions. Young He Shin's adaptive agriculture principles, one researcher explained. "We have seeds that could solve the food crisis, but we would need permission to distribute them openly." Dr. Zelani felt overwhelmed. "You have solutions to all our problems." "We have some solutions," Junki corrected. "But the biggest problems require more than secret aid. The war, the integration failures, the breakdown of diplomatic relationships, these need open cooperation and trust." "The council expelled you," Director Thalavos said quietly. "Why would you want to help them now?" Yunji looked out at the stars. "We are not helping the council," she said. "We are helping the innocent people who are caught in the middle. The families affected by the plague, the children struggling in integration programs, the civilians being killed in the war. They do not deserve to suffer because of political mistakes." That night, Dr. Zelani lay awake in the guest quarters provided by the humans. She thought about everything she had seen. The hidden human colonies, working to save lives. The secret aid being provided to desperate worlds. The solutions that had been developed while the council argued about procedure. But most of all, she thought about the humans themselves. 3 years of exile had not made them bitter or resentful. They had continued to care about others, even others who had rejected them. The next morning, Junki called another meeting. "Dr. Zelani, we appreciate that you came looking for us. But before we can discuss any kind of cooperation, we need to know something important." "What is that?" "Is the council ready to admit they were wrong? Not just about needing our help, but about the fundamental decision to expel us?" Dr. Zelani thought carefully before answering. "I believe some of us are ready to admit that, but I cannot speak for the entire council." Junki nodded. "Then you need to return and have that conversation. When the council is ready to acknowledge their mistake and offer a genuine apology, we will be willing to talk about how to move forward. But understand," Yunji added, "we will never again put our complete trust in the council's hands. Too much has been lost." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any meeting in the organization's 10,000-year history. For the first time, the Great Hall was not filled with orderly debate and careful procedure. Instead, desperate voices spoke over each other as reports of catastrophe poured in from across the galaxy. Dr. Zelani stood at the central podium, holding the data pad that contained her findings from the secret mission. Around her, council members argued about the growing disasters that threatened to destroy galactic civilization. "The plague has now spread to 96 worlds," Medical Director Vex Carinas announced. "Death toll exceeds 80 million beings. Stellar Bridge 4 has collapsed completely," reported Chief Engineer Mex Talis. 6 star systems are now cut off from the galaxy. "The Corvani-Stellax war has expanded again," said Military Coordinator. Nexus 12. 14 systems are now involved. Estimated casualties exceed 200 million. Chancellor Vex Altair sat in his elevated chair, his silver eyes dim with exhaustion. 3 years of crisis had aged him greatly. "Dr. Zelani," he said wearily, "please present your findings from the unofficial investigation." Dr. Zelani activated her data pad, and images appeared on the hall's main screen. Pictures of human stations hidden in dark space, charts showing the secret aid that had been provided to desperate worlds, medical research that could end the plague, engineering solutions that could save the remaining bridges. "The humans have been working to solve our problems since the day they left," she announced. "They have developed treatments for the plague, solutions for the bridge failures, and agricultural programs that could end the famine." The hall erupted in shocked voices. Some council members expressed amazement. Others showed anger that the humans had been operating in secret. "This is unacceptable," declared Nexari Prime. "The humans were expelled legally. Their continued presence in galactic affairs is a violation of council law." "Council law?" Dr. Zelani's voice rose. "Beings are dying while we worry about law violations? The humans have been saving lives while we have been filing reports." She turned to address the entire hall. "I have seen their hidden stations. I have met with their leaders. They have solutions to every major crisis we face, but they will only help if we admit what we all know to be true." "Which is?" Chancellor Vex Altair asked quietly. "That we were wrong. That expelling the humans was the greatest mistake in council history. That our galaxy is dying without them." The silence that followed was deafening. For long minutes, no one spoke. The admission Dr. Zelani demanded would mean accepting that the council's leadership had caused the deaths of millions through pride and prejudice. Finally, an old voice spoke from the back of the hall. "She is right." Everyone turned to see Elder Kex Minos, the oldest member of the council. He had served for over 200 years and had rarely spoken during his final decades. "I remember when the humans first joined us," he said slowly. "I remember the energy they brought, the hope, the willingness to try impossible things." He paused, his ancient eyes surveying the hall. "I also remember voting for their expulsion. It was fear that drove my vote, fear of change, fear of losing. Control." He stood with difficulty, his frail form commanding attention. "Fear made us destroy the best thing that ever happened to this galaxy." Other voices began to join in. Medical researchers who remembered Dr. Bo-Ram Choi's breakthrough treatments, engineers who had worked with human innovation teams, diplomats who had seen humans solve impossible conflicts through patience and understanding. But not everyone was convinced. "The humans violated our most sacred laws," insisted Chancellor Vex Altair. "They interfered with natural planetary death. They acted without authorization. They saved 12 billion lives," Dr. Zelani replied. "How is that a violation worth destroying our civilization over?" The debate continued for hours, but gradually the weight of evidence became overwhelming. The galaxy was failing without human involvement. Every major crisis could be traced to the absence of human innovation, compassion, or problem-solving methods. Finally, a vote was called. Should the Council formally request the return of humanity to galactic affairs? The result was closer than Dr. Zelani had hoped. 623 votes in favor, 224 opposed. It was enough, but the division showed how much damage had been done to galactic unity. 3 days later, Dr. Zelani returned to the hidden human station with an official council delegation. This time, she brought Chancellor Vex Altair himself, along with representatives from every major galactic government. The human leaders who met them were different from the ones Dr. Zelani had met before. These were the senior leadership of the Free Human Fleet, including people she recognized from the old days of council cooperation. Hei Young Lim had been the deputy human ambassador before the expulsion. Now she was the elected leader of the human government in exile. Sung Ho Park had commanded human colony ships and now oversaw civilian refugee operations. Jin Amun was younger, part of the generation that had grown up during the exile. Chancellor Vex Altair, He Young said formally. We received your message requesting assistance with the current galactic crises. The Chancellor stood stiffly. Even now, in this moment of desperate need, his pride made it difficult to speak the necessary words. The Council formally requests the return of humanity to galactic affairs, he said. We acknowledge that your expulsion may have been premature. He Young's expression did not change. Premature? Dr. Zelani stepped forward. What the Chancellor means is that we were wrong, completely wrong. We let fear and pride blind us to the value of human contributions to galactic civilization. We are prepared to offer full reinstatement of Human Council membership, the Chancellor added. All previous trade agreements will be restored. Human colonies will regain their previous status. Sung Ho Park leaned back in his chair. That is generous, Chancellor, but it does not address the fundamental problem. Which is? Trust, Jinna Moon said, speaking for the first time. She was only 24 years old, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen too much suffering. You expelled us when we saved lives. You cut all communication when we tried to help. You called our methods primitive when they worked better than yours. She stood and walked to the window that looked out at the stars. I was 15 when the exile began. I have spent my entire adult life watching this galaxy tear itself apart while humans worked in secret to help people who had rejected us. The question is not whether you need our help, she continued. The question is whether we can ever trust you again. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. The humans were willing to help with the immediate crises, the plague, the bridge failures, the war. But they insisted on conditions that would have been unthinkable before the exile. Human colonies would remain independent, with the right to refuse council authority. Humans would maintain their own military forces. Most importantly, humans would never again be subject to expulsion votes or council override of their ethical decisions. You are asking for special status, Nexari Prime objected. No species has such protections. No species has been expelled for saving lives, He Young replied. These protections ensure it cannot happen again. Some council members wanted to reject the human conditions. But the reality of the galactic crisis made their position clear. Without human help, the civilization they had ruled for 10,000 years would collapse within a decade. The agreement was signed 6 weeks later. Humans would return to galactic affairs, but as protected allies rather than full members. They would help solve the current crises, but they would never again place their complete trust in council leadership. The results were immediate and dramatic. Dr. Bo-Ram Choi's plague treatments began saving lives within days of their deployment. Human engineers stabilized the failing bridges using techniques that seemed impossible, but worked perfectly. The war ended when human mediators helped both sides understand what they really needed instead of what they thought they were fighting. About food production increased as Young He-shin's adaptive agriculture methods were implemented across affected worlds. Integration programs were redesigned around Dr. Min Seo-jung's principles of cultural understanding and emotional support. Within 6 months, the major crises had been resolved. The galaxy began to heal, but the scars remained. Chancellor Vex Altair resigned in shame after the successful resolution of the crises. His final speech acknowledged the cost of the Council's pride. We lost more than human membership when we voted for expulsion. We lost our conscience. We lost our capacity for growth. We lost the thing that made our civilization worth preserving. The new Council leadership worked hard to rebuild relationships with humanity, but the easy cooperation of the past could never be fully restored. Humans helped gladly with galactic problems, but they maintained their independence and their skepticism of Council authority. Dr. Zelani often worked with human medical teams and found them as brilliant and dedicated as ever. But she also noticed the careful distance they maintained. They were helpful but not trusting, cooperative but not vulnerable. Do you think it will ever be the same? She asked Dr. Bo-Ram Choi one day as they worked together on a new research. Project Bo-Ram considered the question carefully. No, she said finally. It will never be the same.